Gunabelian is here with a quick note before the start of the video. We will be holding a contest from when our first Comreton Bardon video premieres until December 30th, 2022, where you'll have a chance to win a signed copy of Ancient Fire by Segamaro's Wooden Jedi and a signed print of Cathaburua by Morpheus Ravenna. All you need to do is be subscribed to our YouTube channel and like and comment on each of the Comreton Bardon videos for a chance to win. For each of the 2 videos you like and comment on, you'll be entered into the contest. Enjoy!
Hello, Sabata, and welcome. My name is Renotaurus Epomapos, also known as Renotaurus Renotaurus Cimbrianus. Welcome. During this month of the celebration of Comreton Bardos, I've decided to focus on myth and mythology. Today, we're going to be talking about Taranos and his struggle against the forces of chaos. Now, specifically, we're going to be looking at a dragon-slaying myth. To do this, we'll be primarily using a comparative religious framework and diving deep into some folklore. As you may know, some polytheistic traditions, such as ancient Hinduism or Vedism, the Roman religion, Religio Romana, and Hellenic polytheism, have very deep and detailed corpuses of lore and mythology. Unfortunately, as I'm sure you also know, within Gaulish polytheism we lack any such first-hand sources, or even really second-hand, that were written down a couple hundred years after the discontinuation or the scaling back of active practices. A good example of those would be maybe the Norse pagan traditions of Iceland, Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. There are, however, many traditions such as Gaelic polytheism and Finnish polytheism where the stories weren't collected until much, much later on. And there's hope for us, because some branches, such as Slavic and Lithuanian polytheism, have no such comparable records at all. However, both Lithuanian and Slavic polytheism have a host of stories and lore that remains. And how is it that these branches can produce viable stories while seemingly us Gaulish polytheists can't? It seems there simply are no Gaulish myths. And so, for many new Gaulish polytheists, we often arrive at the conclusion that there is simply no such thing as a Gaulish myth, or at least not a recoverable one. While this is a logical conclusion to draw, given the limited evidence, I firmly believe it is false, and easily proven wrong by investigating into the folklore of the countries that once were Gaulish. Now, before we get any deeper, there are generally 2 types of folklore. Those truly ancient stories passed down from generation to generation, which only change slowly over time and oftentimes in very superficial ways. And then there are those that are a lot younger and often reflect the climate of the time, even though they may contain elements or characters of older folklore. A good example of this is folklore that's created retroactively in order to explain the origins of folk festivals or naming conventions that we may have long forgotten. Today, we will be focusing upon the former, those ancient stories, rather than the latter, the new additions. They all have their place, but generally, a good frame of reference that is used is 500 years. If you can trace a story back further than 500 years, the chances is that it definitely existed before that. Now, the story we are exploring today, which I firmly believe holds the secret to our very own Chaoskampf, comes from the Swiss canton of Uri, and tells of the creation of their greatest treasures, the mighty twin battle horns. Now, that's not all the story is about, and we will be contrasting this story to the myth of Indra against Vrtra within the Rig Veda to see how much these 2 tales have in common. If we can establish there's enough commonalities, we'll be able to show that this folklore, although changed over time, operates by a Indo-European standard. We'll also be drawing several parallels to Germanic mythology that comes from the Prose Edda. And I will read first the story from Switzerland and then the Rig Veda. Then we'll compare it at the end, and I'll present to you a hypothetical reconstructed version of what I think is the original myth. Now, without any further delay, I present to you the story of the Uri-Stier, the monster bull of Uri. Long ago in the canton of Uri there lived a poor shepherd's boy. Despite his poverty, he was kind and loyal, but very dim. Being a shepherd within the Uri Alps, he often had nothing else to do than to spend all day playing with the sheep. In fact, he loved them, and they were his dearest friends. One day, a group of Frenchmen came wandering through the valley, and with them they had a large flock of sheep. Now these sheep were prize sheep, white and fluffy, pure as snow, not like the stocky and ruddy flock the shepherd's boy was used to. The Boueb had not seen such beautiful sheep, and he was instantly smitten by them, particularly a teeny tiny cute lamb. And so he begged the Frenchmen to give him one, although he could not pay. At first they refused, but he insisted and badgered and begged, and soon the Frenchmen took pity upon him. "Here, if you love the sheep so much, you can have the small one." The boy was elated. He soon took the sheep everywhere with him. It became his constant companion. It slept in his bed and ate at his table, and the boy so loved the animal, he began to become afraid of ever being separated from it. And so he decided to baptize the lamb to save its immortal soul. He went, retrieved some holy water from the local church, and did the rite as best he could, which was not well. Suddenly, there was a large flash of lightning and thunder. As the boy turned towards the lamb, it began to grow large and change before his very eyes. Now before the lad stood a monstrous, scaled beast, a dragon. He was paralyzed with fear as the dragon tore him apart. From then on, the wide pastures of the Lechental were no longer safe. The dragon prowled around and ate sheep. He drank the waters in the creeks. All the people had to move, and the land became stale and uninhabitable. In order to spare their lives, they were forced to bring tribute of sheep to the dragon. Soon, the people grew weary of this, but they did not know what to do. However, one day a traveler came through, a wandering professor, a teacher, or maybe a learned man. He was very secretive, but he did inform the people that he knew of a way to destroy the beast. All he demanded for his knowledge was a bottle of the finest Burgundian wine, which was brought to him. He then told the people the following: "Go and seek out a fine white silver bull calf. The animal shall be fed nothing but milk alone for 9 years, and adding another cow for each year. The animal shall roam free, and its horns shall never be bound until exactly 9 years after the bull's first drink. Then he shall be led by a young virgin, pure of heart, up to the Lechental, where the bull will do battle with the beast and defeat it." The villagers did not know where to find such an animal, but for a small fee the wandering professor put them in contact with a man who lived just beyond the forest limit. Later, the townsfolk met the other man and bought the calf from him. They did as they were told, letting the bull run free, never binding its horns. Each day the calf would drink his share of milk. During the first year he drank from one cow. During his second year he drank from 2 cows. During his third year he drank from 3 cows, and so on and so forth. By his 5th year, a platform had to be built to bring the cows up to the mouth of the bull, and so it went for 9 years. Upon the day of the 9th year, a young girl from the town, who was kind and diligent and pure of body and heart, came to the bull's meadow. She took the ribbon from her hair The bull allowed himself to be bound by it. The whole town stood by and watched as she led the white bull up the mountain into the valley. The villagers then could not see what happened, but they heard it. They heard a great bellowing of the bull and the roaring of the dragon. The weather began to change as a monstrous thunderstorm began to whirl about. Thunder and lightning shook, more bellowing and growling. The fight lasted seemingly for ages, until at last the weather subsided. When the people of Uri went to see the outcome, they found there the red dragon, dead, gored through the stomach. The bull himself lay dead too, not far away. It seems as the battle had exhausted the bull so, he ran to the nearest creek, and drank and drank and drank until his stomach burst. And from this, the place where his stomach burst, under the ground opened up a river that still flows to this day. The girl, on the other hand, was nowhere to be found, and never seen again. The people were glad the beast had been defeated, but saddened by the loss of the girl and the bull. Now, there's another part of this tale that's often left out of popular tellings and only found in older collections of fairy tales, despite the fact that it is the main purpose that the story is written. After the defeat of the bull, and with the help of their village neighbors and allies, the people of Uri bore the body of the bull back to their city. But there they encountered a problem. They could not fit his giant body through the open gates. So they were forced to saw off the bull's powerful horns. These were then fashioned and became the standard of Uri, their mighty battle horns. Whoever blows into the horns of Uri will become known as the Uri Stier. He is granted the temporary title of the bull himself and inspires hope for all his people. Now, this story is very old. The crest of Canton Uri depicts the bull. The bull, an urochs, meaning an old auroch, or simply aurochs, is the namesake, actually, of the Canton Uri. Uri comes from urochs. The earliest attestation of the crest that bears the bull is from the 1200s. The bull is not depicted as white, it is depicted as black, because white is not a heraldic color, or at least wasn't at the time. And putting white on yellow, it would have been silver. Putting silver on yellow would have been a double medal, which is a huge faux pas. It's not something that you can do unless, of course, you're the Kingdom of Jerusalem. And yellow was already chosen for the backdrop. And so instead, they went with a depiction of a black bull. But considering that this crest is inspired by the story, and the crest dates back to the 1200s, we can assume the story dates back a little bit, or even a lot of it, before that. Therefore, we know safely that the story belongs into the first category of folklore, that's been around for a while and gradually changed over time. Now, what leaps forward from the story immediately is the image of a white bull. It's a very Celtic theme. For example, in the story of the brown bull of Cullange, and I'm sorry for any of my Gaelic and Irish friends that are listening, I deeply apologize for butchering that. But there's a war between Cormac and Ulster, and only the death of a white bull finally puts the war to rest and restores order to Ireland. Now, a further specific connection between white bulls and Tyrannus is drawn by Pliny the Elder. He describes a sacred mistletoe rite which occurred beneath an oak tree, a tree commonly associated with Indo-European thunder gods and most sacred tree of the Gauls. Having made all due preparations for the sacrifice and the banquet beneath the trees, they bring thither two white bulls. the horns of which are bound. Then, for the first time, clad in a white robe, the priest ascends the tree and cuts the mistletoe with a golden sickle, which is received by others in a white cloth. They then sacrifice the victims, offering up their prayers that God will render his gift of his auspicious to those whom he so grants it. It is the belief with them that the mistletoe, taken in drink, will impart fusidity to the animals that are barren, and that it is an antidote for all poisons. Such are the religious feelings which we find entertained towards trifling objects among nearly all nations. That sounds familiar, doesn't it? The curing of the land, the white bull whose horns were bound for the first time. Could it be that this ancient rite, if it is actually true attestation, is an imitation of the original myth? Could it be that the folklorification we have is a blending of the rite and the myth? Maybe one colored one, maybe one colored the other. Now, within folklore of Switzerland, we also encounter the character of Dunnel, which translates to thunderling or little thunderer. He's a fiery, red-headed spirit. He is accompanied by lightning and stormy weather wherever he goes. Now, while this fiery redhead may draw some comparison to Germanic Thonar or Donar, his deep connection to cows is not something that's presented very much in Germanic stories. Listen. He wears nothing but the hides of cows, and bellows within the fury of the night. He may break into your home and drink your milk and steal your cows. When he does this, he tears them in half. To me, it seems perhaps that we are dealing with a blended folkloric figure of Donar and Tyrannus, demonized through a Christian lens, though the cow attribute and the bull attribute seems to be specifically Celtic. In any case, I hope I've made my point that the story is teeming at least with Gaulish imagery and themes. So, now, keeping that on the back burner, we'll delve into Indra versus Vrtra and Thor versus Jormungandr to see if the story falls within an Indo-European framework. Now, the story from the Rig Veda goes as follows. Indra is king of the Devas, the Vedic gods, although he wouldn't hold this position later in Hinduism. What strange act shall he do? He whom his mother bore for 1,000 months and many autumns. No peer hath he among those born already, nor among those who shall be born hereafter. Deeming him a reproach, his mother hid him, Indra, endowed with all heroic valor. Then up he sprang himself, assumed his vesture, and filled, as soon as he was born, the earth and heaven. Indra is a strong and honorable warrior, but very brash and prideful. One day, while contemplating his own greatness and power, his spiritual elder of the Devas enters the palace. But Indra is too caught up in his own thoughts to recognize or properly greet him. The teacher, offended, leaves Indra's court and turns invisible. Indra, realizing what he's done, tries to find his teacher and apologize, but he cannot. Now, without a spiritual leader, the Devas start losing their conflict to the Asuras, the mortal enemy of the gods. Indra consults Brahma, who chides him for disrespecting the high priest, as priests are an intermediary to the gods and therefore deserving of worship and respect. Nevertheless, the Devas have lost many recent confrontations, so Brahma feels the Devas have suffered enough and leads them to a new teacher, Vishvarupa. With Vishvarupa's help, the Devas start winning victory after victory. However, there's a hiccup in the plan. Vishvarupa is not just descended from a great yogi and the Devas, but also from Asuras, the enemy of the gods as well. And so he would make offerings not only to his Deva ancestors, but to his Asura ancestors as well. One day, Indra overhears this, and in a blind fury slays him dead upon the spot, cutting off his head. However, Indra immediately regrets this and confesses his wrongdoings to all creation upon the spot. As a result, he is promptly absolved. Twasta, Vishvarupa's father, then lights a sacred fire and pours libation into it, reciting a prayer designed to injure Indra. But he recites it wrong, and instead creates a large, fire-breathing demon, also called a serpent, and thus Vrtra is born. According to the Rig Veda, Vrtra imprisoned the waters of the world, and the gods could not defeat Vrtra. Try as they might, no weapon could injure him. They went to Narayana, who told them how to forge a weapon, an unbeatable thunderbolt, from a powerful, wise hermit's body. Daichi was the name of the man, and he would gladly give his life so the gods might forge a weapon for Indra. Indra then consumes a large amount of soma, the sacred drink of the Rig Vedas. In Tvastar's dwelling, Indra drank the soma, 100 worth of juice pressed from the mortar. Indra then goes on to destroy all 99 fortresses of Vrtra before liberating the imprisoned rivers. Indra then goes to do battle with Vrtra himself. The dragon first swallows Indra, but was made either to vomit him out or Indra cuts his way out of Vrtra's belly. There are different tellings. Either way, the two then face each other as honorable opponents. Vrtra succeeds in breaking both of Indra's jaws, but Indra still manages to slay Vrtra by casting him down into the rubble of an already destroyed fortress. Indra then becomes known as the Bull. The heifer hath brought forth the strong, the mighty, the unconquerable bull, the furious Indra. The mother left her unlicked calf to wander, seeking himself a path that he would follow. Vrtra would then go on to join with Sri Narayana, as he was pure and devoted, despite his status as a demon. Indra then proceeds to slay Danu, the mother of Vrtra, and that's where the tale ends. So, we see in this story quite the parallels with that of the Urishtir. First off, the inciting incident. There are 3 offenses that take place in each story before the arrival of the dragon. Indra spurns his priest, he slays his new priest, and finally, not Indra, but Tvasta messes up the magical formula, which brings about Vrtra. In the Urishtir, the titular thunderer is not present, so all the offenses are committed by the shepherd, until the arrival of the thunderer later. Now the shepherd, he begs for the sheep, although he cannot pay. He violates the nature of their relationship by taking the animal inside, thus disturbing the balance. And finally, he violates the nature of their relationship by botching the baptism and even attempting to baptize an animal in the first place. As such, the animal becomes a dragon and slays the boy. In both stories, advice must then be gotten from a wise figure, either the wanderer or Nahayana. Both point them in the directions of weapons capable of defeating the beast. In the Vedic case, it is a hermit who gladly gives up his life to make a weapon from his body. In the Swiss account, the hermit instead provides the bull. The thunderer is the weapon. Despite the fact that in the Swiss folklore version the hermit does not die, we do later witness the demise, or at least the implied death, of the young girl. So either way, an innocent, willful mortal lays down their life to help the thunder god defeat the dragon. Both Indra and the bull gorge on their sacred liquids for a long time. Indra drinks 100's worth of soma, and the bull drinks 9 years' worth of milk, with 1 additional cow for every year. Finally, in the 3rd act, a battle ensues. The specifics of the battles is where the stories depart, though, clearly, both do take a very long time. Indra is consumed by Vrtra, but then resumes his battle, and although injured, slays the dragon. In this way, Indra does not die, even though he is consumed temporarily, but the great white bull does fall to his injuries. That's not necessarily a deal breaker, though, for we do find there's a strong precedence for this in the Germanic traditions, who have had extensive cultural exchange with the Celts. I will now read from the Penguin edition of the Prose Edda. Against the serpent goes Odin's son, in anger smites the warder of earth. From their homes all men must flee. 9 paces fares the son of Fjolgen, and, slain by the serpent, fearless he sinks. After 9 steps from the battle, Thor falls down, dead. We see a similar account in the much later Velvische Saga, where Thonar falls in his battle against the Midgard snake. He is poisoned by its noxious breath, at the same time as his hammer crushes the beast into a crater, which later becomes a lake. Again, it's mutually assured destruction. However, the story goes on to report that upon his death, pagan pilgrims are said to have brought a large statue of a golden bull, which they dumped into the lake. As it stands, from a purely structural standpoint, the Urishtir lines up, at least major beat-wise, to being quite similar to the Rigvedic account, and also seems to share ingredients with its closer locationally cousin, the Germanic traditions. Of course, this is only to say that these stories came from people who shared a common linguistic origin. So, of course, these things will change in small or greater details over time. But considering the Gaulish themes of the bulls, the dragon fight with the help of the mortal, the thunder, the further point here is speculation, but the story of the Urishtir does contain a lot of familiar imagery that is also present within the Gundelstruck cauldron. The Thunderer, presumably Tyrannus, holding a wheel while being assisted by a mortal. And at the center medallion of the Gundelstruck cauldron is a slain bull without horns. It's commonly said that these horns just fell out. They're maybe made from another material, and that may very well be. But the imagery of a slain bull is still a very, very Gaulish theme. There's another possible Tyrannus figure on the Gundelstruck cauldron that is shown strangling 2 dragons, or at least dragon-shaped creatures. Although the myth and the true nature of the Gundelstruck cauldron is far from being solved, we do see imagery and themes that survive into the modern day. And as such, I feel that I can now safely say that we've established the Urishir story to be one, very old, making it clearly of the older variety of folklore. 2, following a common Indo-European formula, sharing elements with both the Eddas and the Vedas. And although some elements of the story are similar to Germanic versions, the overall themes and imagery lean very Celtic, making a purely Germanic origin for the story unlikely. So, this gives us a story that, although changed over time, probably has a pre-Christian and probably pre-Germanic origin. As such, we can safely say that we have the skeleton of a myth there, and finding an accurate version thereof might require very little digging. A few caveats. Despite the story being known to us longer than the Eddas, who are missing for several hundred years, we don't know whether the more Germanic ending is the result of Germanification, when the Alemanni settlers moved into the region, or it could be that the mutual destruction ending is original to both Gaulish and Germanic traditions, or that one borrowed from the other. A lot of the Urishtir story leans on Christian themes, such as the baptism being the rite that is perverted, and the ultimate form of purity being a virgin teenage girl. Blah, blah. Now, despite that, we can see the structure for the triple violation is still very much present. This means that a simple swapping, probably even accidental, as people's opinions over things over time changed, took place, but we still have the basic functions. Now, the last big thing is that we must contend with the death of Tyrannus, which could be handled in multiple ways. Perhaps Tyrannus is originally a bull, but upon his death he becomes a more man shape. Perhaps he's the first god to die, which does make him ruler of the underworld. Maybe this is a creation story, maybe it's a world-ending story. Now I encourage you to let your imaginations run wild. You have the structure of a Gaulish myth, the triple violation, with then the help from the master, the drinking of the sacred drink, the forming of a weapon or preparation for battle, the actual battle, the thunderer versus the dragon with the assistance by the mortal, and the death of the dragon and the mortal. And then there's the loose thread of Tyrannus' fate. But as long as you follow that loose outline, you'll have your myth. A slightly, maybe personal, spin, but you can be assured that it is based on Gaulish tradition. Just sit on it, think about it. Then, while you do, why not listen to my recon? Long ago, when the world was young, and the Keltoi had the realm of Bittis to themselves, in the land there was a realm, Alpignon, perched high on the mountain that belonged to the Senones. They lived happily under the rule of Moltenrix, a powerful and wise king who was renowned for his glorious conquests and firm leadership. The land was always fruitful, and there was plenty. There was no war or sickness. The Xenogalatis had obtained from the wise Devos the ways which they were to govern the land. They were to honor nature, commune with the gods, and support one another. As long as they did this, there would always be order, and so it was for many years. But gradually, things began to spoil. As the years went on, the Xenogalatis grew ever complacent in their lot. They began to deceive and raid one another for money, falling apart and splitting up, making wars with their neighbors for the smallest, pettiest reason. They hunted wantonly and willingly, driving animals out of their homes and almost to extinction. And they brought their farm animals into their house, being too lazy to let them out to pasture. Soon they would forget their rights and the words to the gods, and they listened not to their vates, for they were old and knew nothing. Even their king spoiled with greed over time. And so it came, when Moltenrix, the Mutton King, was to perform the offering of the sacred bull, he fumbled the words. As the bull lay within the fire, its form began to shift and twist. Dark clouds of thunder rolled as lightning crashed and split. Suddenly, the profaned bull within the fire, it took on the shape of a monstrous dragon. Twisting its snake body, spewing fire, it quickly devoured the unworthy king and burned down the sacred grove. A thick and dense sickness spread through the land. Crops withered and died, and no rain would fall. In order to spare their lives, the Senones were forced to abandon the fertile land and move further down the mountain. Soon they had no other choice but to bring 3 tributes of cattle to the dragon every week. The people cried out in despair, and the priests were lost. Until one day, Gaulish Mercury happened to be passing through their village. He listened to the plight of the people, which the Vates brought to him on their behalf. Then Mercury replied, "For the price of a barrel of fine Rhaetian wine, I can tell you what needs to be done." Then he told the people, "Go seek out a strong white bull calf. The animal shall be fed on nothing but wine for 9 years. The animal shall roam free, and its horns shall never be bound until exactly 9 years after the bull's first drink. Then he shall be led up the mountain by a warrior who has never lost a battle. The Senones then prayed to the Dewas, and soon emerged from the forest a young bull calf, white as the snow and born from the earth. This bull was Taranis, the shape given to him by the earth, the mighty thunderer of heaven, but the villagers did not know this. But they did as they were told, letting the bull run free, and they never tied its horns. Each day the calf would drink his share of wine, whole cauldrons full. From the first year, each day he drank a whole cauldron, and so it went for 9 years. Upon the day of the 9th year, there stood before the bull a young hero named Albiorix. The bull had grown large and fierce and furious. When he stamped his hooves, he would make the sound of thunder. His breath was thick and misty. But Albiorix was not afraid. He donned his armor and horned helm, and he guided the bull up the mountain. The bull, normally loud and aggressive, allowed his horns to be bound by the young man and followed the horned warrior. The whole tribe watched the ascent of their heroes. As Albiorix and the thundering bull arrived at the site of the former village, they were shocked at how dry and stale the place had become. In the middle of the clearing, there stood the great red dragon. Bardon was his name, for that is what he caused: gray misery. The weather began to change as a monstrous thunderstorm started to swirl about. Thunder and lightning shook as the bull dug his hooves into the floor. Then Taranis spoke. "Come, brave Blaros, mighty swallower of the flowing rivers, great snake-legged beast. Let us see if your breath matches your bravery." And soon the two beasts collided and fought with great vigor. Albiorix soon discovered his bronze sword could not pierce the dragon's hide, despite his great efforts. As the dragon and the bull fought against one another, they exchanged blow for blow. Albiorix then had an idea. With his hands quickly he did seize up the lightning wheel that had gathered in the sky. Mortally wounding himself, he swiftly hung one end about the horn of Taranis and held the other in his hand. Then the bull, empowered by the wheel, skewered the dragon, though not before the beast sunk its teeth into his neck and excreted its foul toxins. All three of them lay dead there then, the dragon and the two bulls. But the Deawoi took pity upon great Albiorix. They decreed him brave and true. "What shall we do with him?" cried Mercury. And Rosmerta did speak. "For heroes such as him there shall be a new place. He shall come and dwell with us." They decreed him brave and true, and upon his death he went to live with them. His body was never found. When Taranis had skewered the dragon, a great stream of life-giving water burst forth from the dragon's stomach. All the water the dragon had drank over the last 9 years was set free at once, and still flows to this day, and the land is fertile and peaceful once more. When the warriors of the Senones arrived, the Ovets knew at once what had happened. Quickly, they cut the bull's horns from his dead body, and, Being no longer attached to his horns, Taranis regained his shape, and being no longer a bull, but a god, Taranis could no longer be bound by death. The villagers thanked him, and heaped great praises upon the king of the sky. The Senogalates then returned to their old groves, vowing to uphold the tenets Carnonos had taught them so long ago, all under the watchful eye of the Devas, and protected by great Taranis. To this day, two bulls whose horns have never been bound are offered to the great Thunderer under his sacred oak tree, one for the bull, and one for the warrior with horns. So there you have it. That's my attempt at a reconstructed myth. As you see, I kept some of the formulas, I changed some of the other ones. I selected wine as the soma stand-in because of the role in Gaulish society that it played. But of course, you could just keep milk. And I resolved Taranis' death by making it a death of the shape. Now, of course, this still leaves certain plot holes and issues, and of course, everyone's interpretation might be different. But what we should really be looking at is what the myth is telling us. The myth is telling us that Taranis, the Thunderer, with the assistance of man, can defeat the drought, and that as long as we do not go against the Dewas, generally everything's peachy. So I hope that this talk was enlightening for you. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope I was able to highlight some of the importance of folklore. That being said, look at the folklore of France, Belgium, Germany, Spain, Portugal, the upper Italian peninsula, what is today Slovakia. I mean, look at those stories. And you may find, just as I did with this story, is that there is a Germanic element, but it may be a Germanic element that is simply in common. You're going to find other ingredients in there. And some, like the Christian concepts, are easier to peel away, and some are not. And maybe you don't even want to. And that's okay too. I, for myself, know that I'll probably settle on a version quite similar to the one that I ended up presenting today. But ultimately, what I want to tell you is that our stories are not gone, not all of them, and their structure remains. And it's up to us to find our inner Bardos and tease those stories in there out. How can they inform our praxis? What do they tell us about the gods? And what do they tell us about ourselves and our relationship to them? Anyway, I have been Renotaurus Epomapos, Renotaurus Britomapos Cimbrianus. I am a Watis of Tuda Galatian. If you're interested in this kind of content, stay tuned. Best of luck. Channel the spirit of Lugos or the Lugoves, and let's get crafty, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope you have an awesome night.